just because you failed, in my opinion, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong. You just have to mentally breathe. It doesn't mean whatever you're doing is wrong, because, I just kept trying to hit something with a hammer and go in harder, study more, study harder. And that didn't work. I needed a new tool. And the tool was, keep doing what you're doing, but just, breathe and, just go with it and don't let it consume you.
So we haven't met, but my name is Jon. I founded nursing.com. I had a bad experience going through nursing school too. And that was kind of why I started it up, and saw all these people being like, I thought you were talking about my program.
So I graduated in May of 21. I was in the Air Force. I loaded bombs on fighter jets. So I got out. I went to the University of Massachusetts. I ended up in nursing school, and I hadn't been in school in a decade. I never took a test on my computer on any computer in my entire life. So that was all new, but I made it through nursing school. I graduated with a 3.4. I graduated in May, and I took my first NCLEX in July of 21. And at the time I was using UWorld, and I went 145 questions, and then I failed that one. So then I was proceeded to get back up on the horse, and I'm like, pull your bootstraps up and ready to go. And then I failed again in 81. And then I think at the second fail, I proceeded to switch to my school's program, which was ATI. And then I used that. And then I continued to fail 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Oh my God.
That had taken me up until I think last August. So you're talking August of 2022 or September, and I had failed 6 times. So, I could explain all day the feeling of how it snowballs into everything else in your life. You lose.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty confident guy. I knew I wasn't the best at tests, but I never had a problem in school. Ever. If I studied, I always came out with a 75, 78. I did all right. I didn't know what else to do. My scores on UWorld weren't horrible, neither on ATI. So then I think I got into your program just before my 6th fail. And then I had passed the NCLEX in 75, which, gave me some confidence, but then I failed my 6th one. And it's just, you just don't know what to do. It's like, you've tried everything I've done thousands of questions. I've reached out to people, and it was just tough. It crushes you, because then, you can't work as a nurse. You got to find money other ways. Your degree's useless. I worked in the ER as a critical care tech. It's like the CNA version in the ER. And you do pretty much everything a nurse does. You just don't chart. You can't chart assessments, no IVs, no meds. But, you're right there with them the whole time. And I was there 2 years, and I did my student internship at that same hospital as well. And I was a student nurse in the ER, and I'd been there for 2 years, and I was fine. I was good at it, So that also made the test crush you even more, because you're not a bad nurse.
You can do the job. You know how to do it.
Right. And but the test is telling you suck. This nurse educator had told me she thought the ER experience killed my NCLEX abilities. The job, the real job,
the real
not
life.
the NCLEX job. So when I would go to the NCLEX, I would immediately insert myself into the ER and come up with a scenario in my head and what I would do. So I waited some time, and I knew the new test was coming out for my number 7. Your practice questions came up for the NextGen. And I was doing all those a lot. I took the NextGen, I think April 5th, and I passed in the maximum of 150 on my 7th time testing.
Now, if you can remember back to that first time, if you can explain kind of maybe some of your feelings walking out of the test, and then when you got that report that you'd failed.
So my first test, I walk in And I was, I wasn't overconfident, but I felt like I knew my stuff, but as the test goes along, you start to I felt a little more panicky as it kept going, so you increasingly get like more anxiety.
More anxious.
But I walked out and I finished at a 145, and I felt terrible. Like you just don't feel good because you don't really know, so you just feel like, oh my God, that was so hard. I don't know if I remembered that. I hope I answered that right. It takes a lot out of you. Like if you don't plan on doing anything the rest of that day. And then when I found the fail, I was really, I obviously defeated, but I'm pretty positive and can get back, like I said, pull your bootstraps up. So it's only one time, the first time it's like, all right, what are we going to do to get back at it? You're not the first one and you're not going to be the last one to fail at once. I know a lot of people that have failed at once, even twice. I got back on the horse pretty quick, got back in the saddle and started studying. And I pretty much tested every 45 days.
As quick as you could actually get back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I basically, the whole time I went through this process, the only time I really had a gap was from my 6th to my 7th.
Now, I don't want to focus too much on the negative because this is a positive story in the end, but
definitely.
As you said, telling people kind of your story helps them. And so what I hear from a lot of people is when they have to start telling their classmates and they start seeing their classmates pass. Can you talk about that feeling and kind of how that felt?
Me and this other kid, he failed the first time as well. And then he passed the second time, which I didn't, so again, it feels like you're alone, and it feels like something's wrong with you. And like I said, I knew I wasn't a bad nurse because, people would tell me and I would ask and, so you just feel more like maybe it wasn't for you. What I had to do to pass was I had to not put as much energy into it. I had to still study, but you couldn't invest completely everything into it because then it just consumes you and you just care too much.
Yeah. When external things are good or bad, I tie a lot of my value to that. So how did you get to a point where you could say, you know what, I'm taking a test today and that's just a thing on my to-do list? How did you get to that point?
So I'm a fixer. I like to, if something's wrong, I want to, what else do I have to do? I analyzed, more questions, different programs, stuff like that. And the different programs that you're changing to your program did work for me. So that being said, you don't want to, just because you failed, in my opinion, that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing something wrong. You just have to mentally breathe. It doesn't mean whatever you're doing is wrong because, I just kept trying to hit something with a hammer and go in harder, study more, study harder. And that didn't work. I needed a new tool. And the tool was, keep doing what you're doing, but just, breathe and, just go with it and don't let it consume you.
I had to finally do the same thing and say, just let go. Like that's one professor, it's one class, it's one whatever. And that allowed me to finally finish. So I don't know how to help people get to that point because I still struggle with it, but I think it's critical.
Well, it's hard because you can, you have to, you can be encouraging, but you have to do it on your own mentally because physically, other than changing to your program, I didn't do anything different. I kept using your program and using the NCLEX. And I just had to, once you get into that mental space where, just read it, take it for what it is, answer it, and move on. That's it. You kind of have to have a blank page in your mind. You have to do that yourself. Nobody can do it for you.
A question that popped in my mind now as you said that, because that's what I recommend to people too. It's like each question is a new question. You got to stop, move on, forget the old one. How does that work with these case studies? How were you able to do that? Because they kind of carry along 6 questions about one. How do you forget
with the NextGen, you mean?
Yeah, with the NextGen kind of case study questions.
So here's what really clicked for me about the NextGen. I don't know what happened with that test, but that test works. My brain registers that so much better. Even when I was doing your NextGen questions on your program, it was like clicking, right?
Hmm.
And the reason I feel is because the next gen, they don't put in these tricky words, or they don't word it where it's worded backwards, or it's worded funny so you miss something and then you get the question wrong. The next gen with the case study, it's kind of like, that's it. That's what you got. You read it, and it's just like I'm talking to you if I read you a question, like simple. And then you go through the numbers and stuff, and then you kind of just trust what you know. It's all related. So you feel like you can kind of get in the zone of that. And then once it's over, it's kind of like a new patient if you get another case study on the next 6 questions. In my opinion, it works more in like real nursing. Like you go through steps into, what the problem is with the case study. Whereas the old NCLEX would throw out like a 1-line question. And I'm like, what is that even asking me?
So their whole point, with this is trying to make new nurses safer. Do you feel like this is going to be a better gauge of safe new nurses, or what do you think based on the old versus new?
I think the next gen is 10 times, like, not even comparable in the sense where it's more practical. It is so much more practical in like basics of like, you have a patient, this is what's going on. Look at the numbers a little bit. What do you think is a good move here? The old one was trying to trick me. And half the time I didn't even know what they were asking. And then like, if I went to the review, when I was studying at home, and the review would explain it, and I'd be like, that's what they were asking. Like, I knew the answer. How come they didn't just, the wording? Yeah. And the next gen didn't do that. But even their single questions, 1 question, 4 answers, those were even more. It was a question that didn't try to trick you.
When you walked out that 7th time, did you feel different given that it was the next gen test?
I had been there, done that 6 times,
right.
So I kind of was like seasoned a little bit.
Whatever.
But when I left that, I went 150. And because of how well I did on your program on the next gen, and even my practice scores were like 70 out of the 10 questions. And that was unheard of for me. I was in the 50s, luckily, or low 60s. So I felt confident going in because of, your program, and I passed the NCLEX for the next gen.
Awesome.
So I felt really confident with that. And then when I got done with the next gen, I felt better personally because I felt like I understood it better.
Okay. And so with our program, you mentioned a few times taking the next gen questions and the NCLEX. How did you use our program in preparation for the next gen? Was it just NCLEX, or did you review the questions? What'd you do?
So I changed my approach for the next gen. I stopped doing like the practice questions, the NPQs, because I planned on taking the new test. So I didn't want to mix the two. So when you came out with the next gen questions and all the different categories, there was 10 questions in each category. I did those repeatedly. And I took 1 NCLEX before I tested. And that worked really well for me. And I'm telling you, your next gen questions, Todd, they were like, it was so similar to the real test. I went in, and once I started seeing the questions and how similar they were to yours, I was so relieved. I was like, oh, this is so similar.
Do you mean similar in like the way they were asked, or the way they were set up, or the way they looked?
All of it. Like, obviously they asked, different questions, but the way it was asked and the format was all the same.
Now, going back to kind of some of your experiences and things, have you had any patients ever ask you how many times you took the NCLEX?
Funny you say that. So I haven't been in the ER as a tech for a year. So I've been at a medical. I did that on purpose so I could, just focus on get my mind off of real patient work. But I've been calling a bunch of people to get back into the ER. So I've talked to a few hiring managers and stuff like that. And I took a chance, and I just, because they asked me when I graduated, and, I would assume a follow-up question would be, why did you wait so long? So I was like, the last guy I talked to was from a level 1 trauma center here, hiring manager. And I was like, well, to be honest with you, I had a hard time taking the test. And that's what took me so long to get to apply for a job. And I just passed it. And immediately his tone of voice changed. And he was like, wow, that's so funny. He's like, I have a friend who actually is going through the same thing right now. And like I said earlier, you'd be so surprised once you tell people, how many people have a positive reaction. Like once you tell them you passed, they're like, wow, good for you for sticking with it. I know it's hard. And you think it'd be negative because it's embarrassing, but everybody I've told is like, wow, like opposite, positive, like, wow, that shows what kind of worker you are. Like you think they would want to hire you less. It seemed like he wanted to hire me more because of your perseverance and, you drive to not quit and stuff.
And I think that's a trait that good nurses recognize, is like, we need people who are going to stick, because you've been in the ER and like, there's so many opportunities to quit and to not want to keep going back to work. And so I think, seeing that in a nurse, that they're not going to give up when it gets hard, that they're going to keep going at it. That's a huge, because you don't get that opportunity in school as much. It's like you show up every day, you take your test, you come back, semester changes, but it's not the same in nursing. It's grinding every single day. I kind of liken it. I've likened it before anyway. And when I talk to some students of, those people who walk around saying, I passed in 75 questions first time. It's kind of like that guy who shows up freshman year of college wearing his varsity letter jacket from high school. It's like, no one cares. No one cares. Like, let go of it. That doesn't matter here.
That's one thing with this program. Like, Kenya I've been emailing with her back and forth for literally like a year. And I can't tell you how much of a difference that helps. Like a student who's struggling.
Even ask the questions. And you almost want her to be psyched, right? At that point.
And now at that point, you're going to panic, because then you're going to feel like
I spent all my time on psych. Yeah.
Yep.
So better to just keep it broad, always study broad.
Remember what I was saying before, how like nothing's wrong with you. You're like, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just kind of like mentally calm down and just go back to doing what you were doing. Because I did not change anything. I did practice questions and practice tests the entire time. And look, it took me 6 times, but I got it the 7th,
With the 200% money back, did that help ease the pain, the struggle, the anything after you failed after taking a NCLEX, or did that?
It does help. But, I'll be honest, like if I didn't feel your program was working, that wouldn't have mattered to me. You know what I mean?
It didn't work no matter what. So.
Right. I don't care. I've spent so much already. I don't care. I don't care how much I need to spend. I need this to go away, So, I think it's great. Yes.
It's fine, but it didn't.
That's because you're so confident in what you have as a program though. So I think it shows that you're confident that, hey, this works. I'm telling you, so it does help. I won't say it doesn't. I didn't I got my money, right? I didn't change. You know what I mean? I stuck with you guys because I felt comfortable and it was working.
I like to hear that. Good. Well, I really appreciate your time. I think this is it's going to help a lot of people because like you said, when you struggle, you keep it quiet. When you're successful, you share with everybody. And I think that people get stuck in their minds thinking they're the only one. And like we said, no one walks around with a badge saying how they did on the NCLEX or what their learning disability is or anything. We all walk around trying to look confident. And
well, it's so hard because like I said, it's embarrassing and nobody wants to open up and talk about it. But if nobody opens up and talks about it, it's not going to get fixed, and it's like, there needs to be more programs like yours to actually like support, not just have the questions and stuff, but like I said, your support was a huge part of your program too, that kept me there. And it's like all that combined helped get me to pass. And it's like, there needs to be more of that because people are just like, oh, just buy UWorld and take questions. And it's like, it's not that easy for everybody. They just don't tell you that. Nothing they did in school prepared me for the NCLEX. Nothing.
What would you do different as far as that goes from them teaching you the knowledge versus prepping you for NCLEX? What do you kind of see as a bridge?
What I think they should be doing is when you're a sophomore at the latest, they should start incorporating NCLEX classes in test taking strategy classes, how to think, how to breathe, how to talk, like introduce, having like say getting in, having a partnership with you guys, having you guys come in and like having kids do this all through school periodically to get prepared. So it's not like it's a brand new, it's like a monster under the bed that you never saw before, you know? And it's like, it comes out of nowhere. It's completely different. So if you joined with a college and started telling sophomores this, when they graduate, they're going to walk right into the NCLEX and be like, oh, I've been doing this for a while, you know? And I think it's a huge problem. I wanted to share my story and tell you guys how much I appreciate your program and everything. It helped me get through it.
We really appreciate you guys, because I think everybody's here for the same reason. It's because we really think that it can be done better, and we really want to try to make it better.
And like I said, there's no program out there that has the support and the human interaction and stuff like that, you know, even through emails, it's like, nothing I've used has that. I want it everywhere. So everybody knows, like, you know, that it's like, it's okay.